From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang in Review. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. held a phone conversation with United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Monday, discussing regional developments, economic priorities, and bilateral trade cooperation. In a social media post, President Marcos described the call as productive, saying it reaffirmed the strength of the Philippines-U.S. alliance. He noted that their exchange underscored both countries' commitment to advancing shared regional and economic interests. The discussion comes as Manila and Washington continue to deepen cooperation across defense, security, economic engagement, and regional affairs. The two nations remain treaty allies under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty and have expanded collaboration in recent years to bolster regional stability and economic resilience. In a Malacañang briefing, Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said, the discussion centered on strengthening the Philippines-U.S. alliance, with both sides reaffirming shared priorities in energy, economic growth, and regional security. Castro said President Marcos and Rubio underscored the need to safeguard peace and stability in the South China Sea, stressing the importance of preventing tensions and promoting a rules-based regional order. She added that the two officials also discussed ways to deepen cooperation to advance peace and security across the Indo-Pacific. Castro noted that 2026 marks 80 years of diplomatic relations and 75 years of alliance between the Philippines and the United States, milestones that highlight the enduring strength of bilateral ties. She said the call reflects the continued commitment of both nations to work together for regional peace, development, and stability.
Sa naging pag-uusap sa telepono sa pagitan ng U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at ng Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., tinalakay ang mahalagang usaping pang-ekonomiya, partikular ang Information Technology Business Process Management, usaping enerhiya o oil supply, usaping pang-ekonomiya at pang-seguridad na may kinalaman sa patuloy na ugnayan ng dalawang bansa. Sa kanilang pag-uusap, binigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng kapayapaan at seguridad sa rehiyon, partikular sa West Philippine Sea, kung saan kapwa kinikilala ang pangangailangang itaguyod ang katatagan at maiwasan ang mga tensyon sa rehiyon. Tinalakay rin ng dalawang panig ang mga hakbang upang higit pangpalakasin ang kooperasyon para sa kapayapaan at seguridad sa lugar. Binigyan diin ang lakas ng ugnayang Pilipinas at Estados Unidos na nag-uugat sa 80 years na diplomatic relations at 75 years as allies as of 2026. Ang pahayag na ito ay sumasailalim sa patuloy na pagpapatibay ng alyansa ng Pilipinas at Estados Unidos at sa magkatuwang na adhikain ng dalawang bansa para sa kapayapaan, kaunlaran at katatagan sa rehiyon.
That was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippines and Vietnam declared that peace, stability, and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea are non-negotiable, as both countries elevated bilateral ties and renewed a key defense cooperation agreement on Monday. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. made the statement after bilateral talks with visiting Vietnamese President To Lam, stressing that the two maritime nations share a firm position on safeguarding stability in the disputed waters. The declaration came alongside the renewal of the 2010 Defense Cooperation Agreement, expected to strengthen collaboration in maritime security, military education, and disaster risk reduction and management. Detailed provisions of the updated pact have yet to be released. The South China Sea remains one of the world's most critical waterways, with roughly one-third of global maritime trade passing through the area each year. The Philippines, Vietnam, China, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan maintain overlapping claims in the resource-rich region. Both Manila and Hanoi have faced separate maritime tensions with China in recent years. President Marcos reiterated that the Philippines and Vietnam remain committed to resolving disputes peacefully and in accordance with international law, citing the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the 2016 Arbitral Award, which invalidated China's expansive 9-line claim. Beijing continues to reject the ruling, while Vietnam, though not a party to the case, has consistently emphasized adherence to international law. Beyond defense, President Marcos and Lam also agreed to intensify cooperation against transnational crimes, including internet fraud, human trafficking, illegal gambling, and people smuggling through enhanced intelligence sharing and law enforcement coordination. The upgrade in ties comes ahead of the 50th anniversary of Philippine-Vietnam diplomatic relations in 2026 and as the Philippines chairs ASEAN this year.
We have just witnessed the signing of a pivotal agreement, the renewal of the 2010 Philippines-Vietnam Memorandum of Agreement on Defense Cooperation. This strategically important framework will significantly bolster our joint capabilities in maritime security, military education, and disaster risk reduction and management. As fellow claimant states, we reaffirm that maintaining peace, stability, and the freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea remains non-negotiable. We stand resolute in our commitment to the peaceful resolution of disputes grounded firmly in international law, particularly the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award.
As Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Tuesday joined literacy activities and inspected school preparedness efforts in Navotas as part of the nationwide Brigada Eskwela campaign ahead of the opening of classes on June 8th. During the National Capital Region or NCR kickoff of Brigada Eskwela 2026 at Kapitbahayan Elementary School, the President participated in a storytelling session with grade 1 pupils, reading Ang Matsing at ang Pagong, a classic Filipino tale popularized by national hero Jose Rizal. President Marcos also toured school facilities and inspected newly installed closed-circuit television cameras aimed at enhancing campus security. The President said the government remains committed to providing a safe and conducive learning environment as millions of students prepare to return to school. He also checked ongoing repair and maintenance work being carried out under Brigada Eskwela, where volunteers help clean, paint, and rehabilitate school facilities before the opening of classes. President Marcos noted that many of the volunteers are beneficiaries of the Department of Labor and Employment or DOLE's Tulong Panghanap Buhay sa Ating Disadvantaged or Displaced Workers or TUPAD program. According to the President, 147 schools have already benefited from the initiative, involving more than 3,600 workers and over 26 million pesos in assistance. An additional 181 schools are expected to receive support, benefiting nearly 4,600 workers through more than 37 million pesos in funding. The President also observed the implementation of the Tara Basa program, which enlists college students to help younger learners improve their reading skills while receiving educational assistance. President Marcos likewise visited a reading nook established as part of efforts to expand access to books and learning materials through library hubs and community-based reading spaces. The chief executive expressed optimism over the progress of the administration's literacy initiatives, citing the enthusiasm and reading abilities demonstrated by students during his visit. Brigada Eskwela 2026 carries the theme, Bayanihan sa Paaralan, Nagkakaisa para sa Kaayusan at Kaalaman, and runs nationwide from June 1st to the 5th in preparation for the opening of school year 2026 to 2027. The President said the government hopes all preparations will be completed before students return to classrooms next week.
Dahil tinitingnan lang natin ang paghahanda para sa darating na pasukan. At maraming ang tulad natin pinuntahan ay yung CCTV. Nagkabit tayo ng CCTV. I think dito sa eskwelahan na ito, they have 16 cameras. 16 cameras para bantayan at tiyakin na yung mga bata ay ligtas at safe sila at kung merong mangyari, alam kagad ng mga teacher, alam kagad ng mga administrator. Kaya yun ang inuna namin at ang isa pang pinuntahan namin ay ang Brigada Eskwela. Ito ay naglilinis, nagpipintura, nag-aayos at dito sa ang beneficiaryo, ito sinama natin sa TUPAD program. Kaya yung mga volunteer na nagpipintura, nag-aayos, nagkakabit ng ano, ay sila naman ay nakasama sa TUPAD program para kasama sila sa Task for Work program. Kaya nagpapasalamat kami sa kanilang lahat at na malaking bagay ang ginagawa nila para tulungan ang ating mga administrator, ang mga teacher para makapaghanda para sa pasukan. Tapos na ang implementasyon ng 147 na paaralan ang matutulungan, 3,658 ang naging beneficiary ng TUPAD at ang dinagay natin ay 26.12 million ang kabuuang pondong na ipamahagi natin. Pinapatupad ngayon, meron pang 181 na paaralan, tutulungan, 4,597 ang beneficiary ng TUPAD at may nakalaang 37.14 million para dyan sa programa niya. At ang isa pang pinuntahan namin ay yung Tara Basa program. Ito ay parang yung mas batang version ng aral program. Ito kinukuha natin yung mga college student na gustong tumulong at sila ay nagtuturo para pag summer tinuturuan nila yung mga bata para maging mas magaling, magpasa at sila naman ay nabibigyan din ng tulong para sa kanilang pangangailangan para makapagtapos sila. Meron pa akong tinaanan, meron kaming ginawang yung assistant tinatawag na reading nook. Kung maalala ninyo, meron kaming ginagawa na library hub. Yung library hub, para kompleto ang libro ng mga bata, nagtayo tayo ng mga library hub. Doon kinukuha ng mga teacher yung mga libro na ginagamit nila sa pagturo. Ito naman ang miniature version ng library hub at ginawang reading nook. At na may pagkakataon pa akong magpasa sa mga bata. Ang gagaling ng mga bata, ang tatalino. Alam na yung kwento, hindi ko pa nasasabi. Pero nakakatuwang makita na full blast tayo sa education sector at lahat ng pangangailangan ay kaya bigay ng pamahalaan ay binibigay natin. Alam naman natin ang pinakamahalaga para sa ating kinabukasan ay ang pagturo at ang pag-training sa ating mga kabataan.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says the ongoing turmoil inside the Senate is starting to affect not only the passage of key legislation, but also investor confidence and the broader economy. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the statement following disruptions in Senate proceedings after the arrest of Senator Jinggoy Estrada on plunder and graft charges linked to alleged irregularities in flood control projects. Castro stressed that the executive branch remains ready to work with the Senate regardless of its leadership as long as priority measures are passed for the public. She said lawmakers should continue performing their duties despite the developments surrounding Estrada's arrest. Castro warned that prolonged political tension in the upper chamber could have wider consequences for the country.
Sa parte po ng Pangulo, sa parte po ng Ehekutibo, wala pong magiging issue. Kahit sino po ang leader sa Kongreso, makikipag-ugnayan, makikipag-cooperate ang Ehekutibo para lamang maipasa ang mga priority bills para sa taong bayan. Ang Pangulo po ay hindi isipin ang sarili, hindi isipin ang sariling interes. So yan po ang itanong natin sa Senado dahil tama po, hindi naman po kinakailangan na hindi magtrabaho kahapon dahil maski na po ang paghatid at pagsama kay Senator Jinggoy Estrada bilang kaibigan ay nararapat lamang. Pero hindi po kinakailangang talikuran ang sariling mandato para lang sa ganitong klaseng issue. Pero kung ganito po nangyayari sa Senado, mahihirapan po talaga. Hindi lamang ang Pangulo, kundi ang taong bayan. Apektado ang taong bayan dito. Pati po ang ekonomiya ay maaapektuhan sa ingay at gulo sa Senado.
The palace was responding to concerns that several administration-backed priority bills may be delayed as Congress approaches adjournment. The Senate is currently facing internal strain following Estrada's June 1st arrest over allegations involving more than 573 million pesos in supposed kickbacks from flood control projects. The situation has triggered a political standoff, with some senators boycotting sessions in protest and raising concerns over institutional independence, further complicating legislative proceedings in the chamber.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is urging the Senate to immediately resume its sessions, warning that the chamber's ongoing impasse is delaying critical legislation needed to confront the emerging global oil crisis. President Marcos said lawmakers must act on measures that would help cushion Filipinos from rising fuel prices, including a possible supplemental budget and amendments to existing laws identified during a recent Uplift Committee meeting. He stressed that these actions are essential to delivering timely assistance to the public as global oil markets continue to destabilize. The president also questioned the Senate's decision to cancel sessions for 2 straight days following the arrest of Senator Jinggoy Estrada on plunder and graft charges linked to flood control anomalies. President Marcos expressed concern that recent events have thrown the Senate into disarray, undermining its leadership and halting essential legislative work at a time when stability is urgently needed. The chief executive emphasized that while the executive and judiciary continue to function, the Senate's paralysis threatens the government's ability to respond to the oil crisis and maintain public confidence. The Senate has not held sessions since Monday after members of the majority bloc, led by Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano, skipped attendance following Estrada's arrest.
Get back to work. Get back to work because it's important. Ang dami natin kailangan gawin. Look, we had a meeting sa Uplift Committee and marami tayong kailangan pagawa sa mga batas. Like we were thinking baka magka-supplemental budget, baka magpaka-amyendahan namin ang mga ibang batas. Ito ay kailangan para makapagbigay tayo ng tulong sa taong bayan dahil nga sa oil crisis. Kung walang session, hindi ko nga maintindihan dahil ang pagkaintindi ko is that ang rules, nag-congressman naman ako, nag-senador din ako. Ang rules dyan, bago ka mag-cancel ng session, you have to inform the other house 3 days before you cancel a session. And there has to be a very good reason for canceling a session. I don't think na ihahatid mo ang isang senador para pupunta kung saan siya pupunta. Hindi yata sapat na dahilan yan para i-cancel ang isang session. Isang session lang yun. Ngayon, kanselado na naman ang isang session. Hindi ko nga maintindihan kung paano sila magtatrabaho kung ganito. Ang House of Representatives ngayon ay nagtataka kung paano ba, nagbago na ba yung rules, nagbago na ba yung mga patakbo natin kagaya ng sa mga nakaraan. It is a rule that is contained in the Constitution. And so I'm afraid whatever all these events that we have been witnessing has thrown the Senate and its leadership into the whole Senate into disarray. It has discredited the leadership, and it has stopped the essential business of legislation in government. The two other departments continue to work. The executive continues to work. The judiciary continues to work. Why does the legislation decide? Why does the legislature decide to stop working? The legislature is now in disarray. But that is exactly the opposite from what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to achieve some form of stability so that people can get on with their lives, so that people can plan ahead for their future, so that people can count on the assistance of government during this time of an emergency. And we cannot do that if the legislature decides to stay at home and have a vacation. That is anathema to everything that governance is about. I never imagined in my entire life, never mind my entire political life, that such a thing could happen, especially to the august, it's no longer august now, but to the august body of the upper house, the Senate of the Philippines. It's a very sad situation to have to watch. The country is in need of assistance. People are in need of assistance. How can we provide that assistance without the proper legislation to back it up? That is my problem here, looking at from the side of the executive. Yeah. We're examining all our options. We're looking at the law, we're looking at the Constitution, and to see how we can remedy the situation. But it requires the cooperation and the commitment of the Senate leadership to continue with their work. Otherwise, the executive is co-equal only to the legislature. We cannot tell them what to do. We cannot punish them for what they are doing. They have to regulate themselves. And they haven't been doing much of a good job right now.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is urging thousands of graduating college students in Manila to stay focused on finishing their degrees as he led the distribution of 88.52 million pesos in educational assistance under the Presidential Scholars Program on Wednesday. A total of 4,426 scholars from Manila's 6 districts received 20,000 pesos each. Support, the president said, is meant to help students push through to graduation. In a speech to beneficiaries gathered at the Rizal Memorial Coliseum, President Marcos said once they receive their diplomas, they will meet again. The president cited Second Congressional Commission on Education, or EDCOM2 data, showing that nearly 29% of college students dropped out in 2025, stressing the urgency of keeping young Filipinos in school. President Marcos said the government is committed to helping more students complete their education, calling them the country's future workforce and leaders.
Dahil po nababahala kami, meron po tayong mga statistiko na nalalaman yung EDCOM, yung Commission on Education, yung pangalawa, noong 2025, halos 29% ng college student nag-drop out noong 2025. Napakasayang. Ito po ay mga malalapit na magtapos. Kaya't sa ngayon, sa halos 15,000 na po na barangay ang nabigyan ng suporta nitong programa na ito. Dito naman sa Maynila, mahigit 4,000, 4,000 ang magiging presidential scholar dito. At ito ay malaking bagay upang makatulong sa inyong edukasyon. At yan po ang aming magiging programa at tinitiyak po natin na ito ay mabilis bumaba at diretso po sa taong bayan. At hindi dumadaan-daan kung saan-saan pa at sa inyo tuloy-tuloy galing sa national government, mag-distribute ang local government, mabilis ang pagtanggap ng ating mga mamamayan. Kaya yan po ang ating programang bawat bayan ay makikinabang. Idagdagan na rin natin ng bawat barangay ay makikinabang. Yan po ang ating programa. Nakakatiyak po ako na ang ating mga presidential scholar ay mag-aaral na mabuti. Pagsipagan ninyo ito at magkikita ulit tayo kapag may hawak na kayong mga diploma.
The scholars were selected from Manila's 896 barangays with 5 graduating students identified from each village. Speaking to reporters, President Marcos said the assistance is part of the administration's ongoing Bawat Bayan Makikinabang program, which channels support directly to communities nationwide. The chief executive also signaled that funding for local governments may be increased if the program continues to show positive results. The 88.52 million peso package forms part of the Socio-Civic Projects Fund's Financial Assistance Program, which provides 200,000 pesos to every barangay. Marginalized families also receive 10 kilograms of rice under the initiative.
This is our continuing program sa bawat bayan ay makikinabang. We've done this before. We will continue to do it hanggang mabuo natin ang buong Pilipinas. Sa kasalukuyan, na kapag malapit na tayo sa 20,000 barangays na nabigyan ng tulong, kaya halos kaunti na lang, kalahati na, mabubuo natin ito for the rest of the school year. So I'm very happy that it is going well, and kagaya ng aking sinasabi sa ating mga opisyal, pagka maganda talaga ang magiging resulta nitong programa ay sa pagsulat ng budget sa susunod na taon, susubukan natin, pipilitin natin na magiging mas malaki pa ang mabibigay natin sa mga local government officials.
Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang on Thursday reaffirmed its recognition of Senator Sherwin Gatchalian as the acting leader of the Senate. saying the move is grounded in jurisprudence and long-standing parliamentary practice. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the executive branch acknowledges Gatchalian's leadership following his election by the Senate's new majority bloc during Wednesday's session. Gatchalian's election came after minority senators, joined by Senator Francis Escudero, established a quorum and proceeded with legislative business. Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri was also chosen as chair of the Committee on Rules, while former Senate President Vicente Soto III administered Gatchalian's oath as the chamber's most senior member. The leadership shift unfolded amid days of turmoil triggered by the arrest of Senator Jinggoy Estrada and the absence of members of the former majority bloc led by Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, which resulted in multiple canceled sessions. Cayetano has denounced the move as an illegal coup d'etat and refused to recognize the authority of the new majority composed of 12 senators. Castro said Malacañang's position is anchored on the landmark Avellino versus Cuenco ruling, a long-cited precedent in Senate leadership and quorum disputes. She added that a similar principle guided the resolution of the 2015 leadership issue involving then-Senate President Franklin Drilon. The palace issued its recognition shortly after Gatchalian's election, saying it deemed the process valid and consistent with parliamentary norms. Castro stressed that Malacañang considers it proper to acknowledge the new leadership because it emerged through what the executive views as a legitimate exercise of Senate procedure.
Matatandaan po natin kahit naman po na nagkaroon ng isang session sa pamumuno po ni dating Senate President Franklin Drilon. Ginawa rin po nila ito, that's 2015. Kumbaga ay ang kasong Avellino versus Cuenco rin ang kanilang sinunod. Doon sa kaso ng 2015, sinasabi po na 4 ang nasa abroad at 2 or 3, 3 po ang sinasabing nakadetain. So, ang ginawa nilang recognized base number ay 17. So, dito lumalabas na since nakadetain si Senator Jinggoy Estrada, definitely masasabi natin na he is beyond coercive reach. Dahil hindi mo naman to pwede mapatawag bigla-bigla nang hindi ka pa magbo-motion sa court kung saan siya nakadetain. Or rather, magre-request ka sa court para siya ay mabigyan ng chance na makalabas. At ito naman si Senator Bato ay hanggang ngayon ay hindi natin alam kung nasaan. So definitely, he is beyond coercive reach. Kahit tanong mo siguro ang kanyang pamilya ay hindi nila masasabi. Kahit puntahan pa ng Sergeant at Arms, si Senator Bato sa kanyang bahay, ay hindi mo rin ito mapapatawag. So with that, lumalabas na 22 ang recognized base number. So nagkaroon ng 12 at ayon na rin sa Avellino versus sa Cuenco, ang 12 kapag ka po dahil sa Avellino versus Cuenco lumalabas na ang recognized base number ay 23 dahil isa ang nasa abroad. At nirecognize po ng korte, mismo ng Supreme Court, na ang 12 ay makukonsider na majority in relation to the declaration of a quorum. So with the same scenario, 22 ang lumalabas na recognized base number, 12 ay masasabi nating majority para mag-form ng isang quorum.
Was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is prepared to call a special session of Congress once the Senate submits a formal request and presents valid grounds, the palace said Thursday. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro confirmed that the President will act immediately upon receiving an official communication from the Senate leadership under Acting Senate President Sherwin Gatchalian. When asked if President Marcos is inclined to approve such a request, Castro said the President is inclined to give in to the official request for the special session. Among the measures the President wants Congress to tackle is the proposed anti-political dynasty law, which Castro identified as one of his priority bills.
Anyway, ganito yan, no? Sabi nila sila ang magre-request for a special session. So as soon as the new leadership will send the official request for special session addressed to the President, then the President will act immediately on that. Inclined ang Presidente na to give in to the special request for or rather official request for the special session. Bakit? Kasi kung marami maaantala dahil sa mga nangyayaring ganitong kaganapan, hindi po nais ng Pangulo na magkaroon ng pag-antala sa trabaho ng Senado. Provided lamang po ang official request ay dapat po rin na kinapapalooban ng valid grounds for the calling of a special session. Tignan po natin muna kung ano yung special request nila. Kasi ang gusto po talaga ng Pangulo sa ngayon, ito ang isa sa mga priority bills niya po talaga yung anti-political dynasty. Gusto niya po talaga ito maipasa.
The possibility of a special session surfaced after the Senate lost several session days due to a leadership dispute that stalled legislative work. President Marcos earlier warned that disruptions in the chamber could delay priority measures meant to address urgent economic challenges, including the impact of rising global oil prices. Gatchalian has said senators are now studying whether a special session is needed to act on pending measures and appointments, including the confirmation of 5 military generals whose promotions may lapse if Congress fails to act before they reach mandatory retirement age. The Senate is also reviewing other bills and matters left pending due to the suspension of regular sessions.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Malacañang said Thursday that domestic political tensions may have played a role in the Philippines' failed bid for a non-permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council or UNSC. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the statement when asked whether recent political developments could have influenced the vote, despite President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s active campaign for the country's candidacy. She explained that the negative perception created by political disputes and controversies may have shaped how other countries viewed the Philippines.
Yes, lahat ng political noise, lahat ng political tensions, nakaka-apekto ito. At ito ang nakikita ng buong bayan at buong mundo sa impression dito sa Pilipinas. So, nagiging negatibo dahil sa mga ingay na ito, na karamihan naman ay mga obstructionist katulad ng pag-describe ng Pangulo sa huling kapihan with the media.
Philippines lost to Kyrgyzstan in the race for the lone Asia-Pacific seat for the 2027 to 2028 term. Kyrgyzstan secured 142 votes, while the Philippines received 49 in the fourth round of balloting at the UN General Assembly. The Marcos Jr. administration had mounted an aggressive diplomatic campaign, framing the bid as part of efforts to strengthen the country's role in multilateral decision-making. The UN Security Council is one of the most influential bodies in global governance, responsible for maintaining international peace and security. A non-permanent seat is widely seen as a platform for countries to expand their diplomatic influence and help shape international policy.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang in Review. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.